They say you can choose your friends, but you're stuck with your family. For years, I believed that blood was thicker than water, that no matter what happened, my relatives would be there to hold the line when the storm hit. I was wrong. My mother, the woman who gave me everything, was fading away. She was in the hospital, and I was thousands of miles away, working to build a future for us. My 9 relatives, my uncles, aunts, and cousins, were the ones taking care of her. Every time I called, they had a script. "She's resting, Majid," my uncle would say. "The doctors are doing everything. You don't need to come, you'll just disrupt her recovery." I trusted them. I sent money for her treatments, for the best medication, for the comfort I thought she deserved. But something felt off. The photos they sent were old, staged, and grainy. My calls to the hospital were always blocked by administrative errors or privacy protocols. I was living in a nightmare of manufactured silence. I remember waking up at 3 a.m. one cold Tuesday, a strange heaviness in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I felt a disconnect, a psychic scream from my mother that no one else could hear. That morning, I bought a plane ticket. I didn't tell them I was coming. I couldn't take the polite lies anymore. When I landed, I didn't go to the house where they were guarding her. I went straight to the hospital records department. I walked into that building like a man possessed. I gave the receptionist my mother's name, and she looked at me with a confusion that curdled my blood. "Sir," she said, "there has been no patient by that name admitted here for over 3 months." My world stopped. The air in the room became thin. If she wasn't here, then where was she? I rushed to the ICU where they claimed she had been transferred. The corridors were endless, the lights too bright. I felt like I was running through a labyrinth of deceit. My phone began to vibrate. It was my uncle. He was calling to check on me, to see if I was still working far away. I looked at the phone, then at the empty hallway, and for the first time, I realized the full scale of the deception. They hadn't just lied to me. They had hidden my mother away like a secret they wanted to bury. And standing at the end of that hallway, holding a chart, was a nurse who looked at me with eyes that suggested she knew exactly who I was and exactly what had been done to my mother. I stood frozen in the hospital corridor, my heart hammering against my ribs. The nurse, whose name tag read Sarah, stepped toward me, her eyes softening as she saw the sheer terror and rage on my face. "You're the one who's been calling, aren't you?" she whispered. "I recognize your mother." My throat felt like it was filled with sand. "Where is she? My family told me she was admitted here." Sarah glanced nervously left and right before pulling me into a quiet corner. "She was here," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "But your relatives forcefully discharged her 2 weeks ago. They didn't take her home. They dumped her in an old, run-down care facility on the outskirts of the city." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. "Why? Why would they do that?" I wanted to scream, but Sarah grabbed my arm, steadying me. "They didn't want you to find out," she said, pulling a folded white paper from her pocket. "These are the documents your uncle tried to bury. It explicitly states that your mother required continuous specialized care, yet they deliberately stopped her treatment so that she would—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The proof was in my hands. It wasn't just paper. It was a map of my family's sick conspiracy to let my mother fade away. "They've been taking thousands from me every month, claiming it was for her medical bills," I said, my teeth clenched in pure fury. Sarah handed me another file. "Look at this," she urged. "These are the forged receipts. Your mother was alone, terrified, and had no idea that her son was working himself to the bone to save her. Your relatives wanted her out of the way so they could seize the property and burn through the money you were sending." I clutched the evidence against my chest like a shield. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I thanked Sarah and walked out of the hospital. The sky was overcast, mirroring the storm raging inside me. My blood was boiling with a cold, calculated need for justice. Those 9 people I once called family were now my enemies. I knew exactly what I had to do. I turned my car toward that care facility, knowing that tonight, their entire web of lies would come crashing down. I pulled up to the dilapidated care facility, the engine of my car sounding like a roar in the silent, desolate outskirts of the city. As I stepped out, I saw them. All 9 of them, my uncles, aunts, and cousins, were gathered near the entrance, laughing as they smoked, their luxury cars parked in a neat row. They were celebrating a success that was built on my mother's suffering. When they saw me, the laughter didn't just stop. It died instantly. My uncle's face went pale, his cigarette falling from his trembling fingers. I didn't rush them. I walked slowly, deliberately, the documents from the hospital clutched firmly in my hand. "Surprised to see me?" I asked, my voice cold and steady, cutting through the heavy tension like a knife. My cousin tried to step forward, stuttering some excuse about a medical emergency, but I held up my hand. "Save it," I said. "I don't want your lies anymore. I want my mother." I pulled the hospital records and the forged receipts out and threw them onto the hood of my uncle's car. The wind caught a few pages, scattering them like confetti in the dirt. "I have the proof," I announced, my gaze shifting from one face to the next. "I know you took the money. I know you dumped her here to die. And I know every single one of you stayed silent." The silence that followed was deafening. They looked at each other, not in defense, but in panic, their unified front crumbling into cowardice. My uncle tried to grab my arm, his voice desperate. "Majid, listen to us. It's not what it looks like. We just wanted to—" I shoved him back, the rage I had been suppressing finally breaking through. "You wanted to steal," I snapped. "You traded a human life for greed. You are no longer family to me. You are nothing but criminals." I turned my back on them and walked toward the facility doors. I didn't care about their excuses or their threats. The confrontation wasn't about winning an argument. It was about reclaiming my mother's dignity and showing them that their time of control was officially over. The moment I stepped into that dim room, the world outside ceased to exist. My mother was sitting by a small, cracked window, staring at the horizon with hollow eyes. When she saw me, her expression shifted from confusion to a joy so fragile it broke my heart. "Majid," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with love. I fell to my knees, taking her frail hands in mine, and for the first time in months, I felt the heavy burden of the past lift. I wasn't just a son anymore. I was her protector. I spent the next hour moving her out of that place, ignoring the desperate protests of my relatives who were still lingering outside, now arguing among themselves like rats in a trap. I didn't engage them. Their punishment was already underway. I had sent the documents to the local authorities and my lawyer while I was driving to the facility. Their greed was no longer a secret. It was a legal case. As I carried my mother to my car, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The family I had feared and trusted was gone, but in their place I found a new strength. I took her to the best hospital in the city, where she finally received the care and dignity she deserved. Watching her sleep peacefully in a clean, quiet room, I realized that true wealth wasn't in the money I had lost or the inheritance they tried to steal. It was in the fact that I had chosen to fight, to question, and to act. I hadn't just saved my mother's life. I had reclaimed my own agency. I sat by her bedside, watching the sunrise. My phone buzzed with messages from my relatives, begging for forgiveness and offering excuses, but I simply turned it off. I didn't need their apologies, and I certainly didn't need their presence. I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones waiting for you to stumble. But as long as you have the truth, you will always have the power to stand back up. I kissed my mother's forehead, grateful for every second we had left. The storm had passed, and for the first time in a long time, the future was finally ours to write.